Hi guys, this is Dr. Sadashivam once again with you. In the last video, we had talked a lot about what is emotional intelligence and we had discussed completely about that. One thing came out very clearly from that video that whatever we are talking about intelligent quotient, even more important than that is the emotional quotient. Because summary is till a certain level, people can reach up to a certain levels as a result of studying in good institutions, as a result of some of the accomplishment in their career. But after that limit, if somebody wants to rise in their levels, your qualification, the university, they will cease to be differentiators. Something else is required, that is emotional intelligence. But this is about career, but career is not everything in life. We live in a society, we interact with people around us, and we live in a society, and therefore emotional intelligence is required even at a personal level. Because in fact, if you look at the last video, the whole video focuses on that. In this particular video, we are going to talk about the preeminence of heart above the heads. Because heart is something that your mind tells you, and head is something what your intellect tells you. We call it as wisdom. Now, when we talk about preeminence, it is always the heart which is preeminent. Even sociologists have validated it through so many researches, because whatever we are talking about, these emotions, it becomes extremely important, especially when things are totally important, so important to leave it to intellect alone. Because there are certain things, how much ever you use your intellect, it is not sufficient. Over and above that, the feelings, the emotions, they become much more important. For example, today, if you are filling up the annual appraisal of some employee, whether he should be promoted, how much increment he needs to be given, scientific methods are being employed for that. To a large extent, they are scientific. There is no doubt in that. You have KPIs, key performance indicators, your key result areas. All these things are extremely important. We try to quantify all that. But one thing that we need to keep in mind, how much ever you quantify them, ultimately, when it comes to the point of giving them the increment or a decision whether to promote them or not, judgment is extremely important. Personal judgment, that is extremely important. For example, if you talk about people, senior people who have started with a small shop and who had built multi-crore empires. I have MDR Masala Man as I'm speaking about. If you sit with them and speak to them, they may not know much about your scientific management techniques, what is business plan. They may not know what is KPI, KR. Quite possible they are not aware. But most of their judgments are generally correct, because those judgments come from their instincts that emerge from their past experiences, what they have learned in their past experiences, etc. etc. It's not just you study for 2 years, get an MBA degree, and you have learned everything, because life teaches you lots and lots of things, and that's what exactly we call as emotional intelligence, what we learn from the society. Now we are talking about one generation, say 30-40 years is somebody's active life. We're talking about 50-60. But when you talk about evolutionary biology, we don't know how old this world is, how old this universe is. We really don't know. Maybe millions of years old. If you look at this evolutionary history, if you walk back in this journey, because every time when this mankind survives, we're talking about mankind survival, fight and flight. Of course, that becomes totally a different subject. We are not going into it. But if you look at it from an evolutionary biology point of view, those reactions, we have faced fears, we have faced various situations, we have learned to adapt to those situations, and over a period of time, over generations and generations, our brain has been evolving. Even today, if you look at it, for example, think of some of the instincts, say flight or fight. We have not learned all those in this generation, but this evolution has happened over the millions of years. We're not talking about this particular birth. If you get into philosophy, you get into transmigration of souls, incarnation, rebirth, etc. We're not talking about it. We're talking about the genetic factors that are passed on from generation to generation. It's like a SIM card. All those experiences are stored in that SIM card, and there are certain data in the SIM card which is put, and then we add additional data, right? Much in the same way, when we are born in this world, we are born with certain past experiences, and then depending on how the science evolves, technology evolves, we keep learning and keep inputting the data, and it's a constant process that is happening. For example, if we talk about this life expectancy, it's around 60-70 years in India on an average. We're not talking about the 70 years. We're talking of millions of years, how our brains have developed, and as a result of which, how our emotions got crystallized over a period of time, right? Now, we're talking about your annual performance systems. We were talking about KPI, KRA, what is his key performance indicator, what are his key result areas, what is his target, what is his achievement. We do all that. Yes, to some extent, we are trying our level best to bring in science into it. We have a scientific management, father of scientific management. But in spite of all that, there are certain decisions which are taken based on instincts, and we have talked a lot about it in our video number 1 also. We were talking about the example of this MDR Masala man. These guys may not have done their masters in business administration, but he can sit and say, for this particular distributor, don't give him any extra credit. Don't for this guy, you don't have to take any collateral. You can just close your eyes and give him. We can't implement such kind of things in today's atmosphere, but experience is experience, and many a times, most of the times, they turn out to be true. Probably that's the secret of how they developed a small shop into a multi-crore empire, right? But today, this is what we are trying to do, that artificial intelligence. Today, we have artificial intelligence, machine learnings, etc., etc. People are doing your ML, AI, data science, the data technologies, Python, Hadoop. A lot of frameworks are big, improvements are made. But at the same time, these are feelings. These emotions are something which are extremely important, which play a very important role in our everyday lives, right? We have heard a lot about comedy of errors, but in the context of emotional intelligence, if you speak, it is tragedy of errors. And Daniel Goleman talks about a small story about a 14-year-old girl. Her name is Matilda Crabtree. She's a 14-year-old girl, and she wants to play pranks with her dad, right? Prank, like normally small girls do that. They play with their dad. They hide themselves under the door, and when the dad comes, boo, they threaten their daddy and they laugh and smile. She was involving in such kind of a childish prank. In one of the instances, what happened was, Matilda was supposed to go to her friend's house for a sleepover, but because of some reason she came back home. And this is a story narrated by Daniel Goleman in his book, I think page number 5 or something. He talks about that. There is a chapter which is called as Passion's Overwhelming Reasons, very important concept. When father was under the impression that the daughter is in her friend's house, but he is under the impression somebody has entered her daughter's room. So he takes out his .357 caliber revolver and he goes inside the room. And when this girl says boo to her dad just to give him a surprise, this guy got frightened and he shot .357 bore, and it hit the Matilda Crabtree's neck. She was admitted in the hospital and she died 12 hours later. This is a real story, guys. Now, if you look at the story, there is a very important lesson that emerges. A very tragic story, and there is no doubt in it. This is the emotional legacy of evolution. We are going to talk about it. If you look at the complete evolutionary biology, nature has taught us that it is a prime duty of any man to save protect his family from danger, and he doesn't have the time to reason. There is no so much time for him to think, analyze what is good, what is bad. There is no time left for all that, and he acts on impulses, as a result of which he was not able to think, he was not able to reason, right? And it's the fight between your dil and the dimag. It's the fight between your mind and the heart, right? We're talking about passions, right? And he shoots her. Very tragic story. There is absolutely no doubt in it. But this is just a small instance. But probably, if you look into the history, there may be hundreds of such instances which are happening, and these are extremely important from the emotional intelligence point of view. Now, what are these emotions? Now, if you look at the long run, a long process of evolution, these emotions, they act as a guide. They have been acting as a guide for us to lead our actions. Now, if you look at the society's rules and regulations, right? Please understand one thing. We all live in a society, and there are certain behaviors which are accepted in the society and certain behaviors which are not accepted. And these are rules which we have created. Some lawmaker. Now, if you talk about the whole society, it is nothing but we are all bound by social contracts. Because certain rules apply in the animal society. They also have certain regulations. Even in human beings, we have certain rules and regulations. Who made all these rules and regulations? We only made. Who within us made this? He may be a king, he may be a monarchy, it may be a constitution, it may be a democracy, any form of government. But one thing is very simple. There are certain people who decide these rules, and then you have people who enforce the rules. There are certain people who prosecute. There are certain people who give judgments. If you go back in the history, for example, you have this Code of Hammurabi. You have heard about 10 Commandments of Hebrews. We have learned a lot about edicts of Ashoka. We have learned a lot about that in our school history and all that. So all these things are carrying on for the last hundreds and thousands of years. But in spite of all these social constructs, social rules and regulations, in spite of that, we witness many such instances where your passions overwhelm reasons time and time again. For example, we have seen instances of people murdering people, and he takes the head in his hand and reaches the police station. I saw this news last week. I saw it last. People murders others, and they go to police station and surrender. This is what is passion overwhelming reason. He doesn't have the time. He's governed by passion. He's governed by impulse. Right? Not the first one. Even in the first video, we came across an instance which happened in the Egyptian Airlines, right? Very decent, educated, well-respected family. But look at how they were involving in a fight. It was a fist fight. Like third grade, it was a fist fight. Like we have seen that happening. So therefore, at the cost of repeating it so many times, I would like to see that it is all about basic neural circuitry of emotions. Like in an electrical circuit, you have a circuit and you have a switch, and you close the circuit, open the circuit. Because of this, the light glows or it puts off. It is something like a brain neural circuitry. You may be educated, you may be civilized, but at the anatomy level, there is a circuitry within your brains, guys. This cannot be changed at all. Your education cannot change that, because this is a result of millions and millions of years of evolution. It's not just a question of 10 years or 20 years or 30, 40 years, our father, grandfather. It is far, far old. Like if you look at your grandfather, great grandfather, maybe 80 years old, maybe 1900 or late 1800. We're not talking about that. We're talking about 50,000 years back. We're talking about brain and how it evolved over a period of time. It is these things, it is these evolution of the human brain that has led to all these feelings, emotions, etc., etc. Right? So all these things are extremely important, and how this brain has evolved in the last thousands of years is influencing our emotional behavior, your passions, our passions overwhelming reasons, etc., etc. Now we have talked about two things. One is we have talked about emotional brain, and second we have discussed a lot in terms of how passions overwhelm reasons. And third, we are now going to talk about impulses, right? What do you mean by impulses? Let me explain that in a simple language. For example, if you're standing like this and suddenly somebody puts their finger in your eye, you will suddenly close your eyes. It is not a voluntary behavior, but reflex. You are governed by reflex action, right? Much in the same manner, most of our emotional behavior is also a part of impulse. Whenever you talk about emotions, because these emotions prepare your body for a specific response. In organization behavior, we have studied about stimulus response theory, etc. People who have done their MBA, you or know this, Pavlov, various Russian scientists. Many scientists have worked in this particular area. So broadly speaking, every emotion prepares our body for a certain kind of response. For example, if you're very angry, what happens? Your blood rushes to your hands. It rushes to your hands. Your hand gets strengthened, right? Suddenly start, involving in an impulsive reaction. You will catch hold of whatever is available in hand. It may be a brick, it may be a hockey stick, and then you will start using that. That is what is called as impulses. Because at that point, the blood is flowing into your hands. For example, when a person is in a state of fear, blood flows to your legs, guys. It makes your legs stronger, right? You will start running. You will flee, right? This is what generally we call it as a flee or a flight response. Flee or a fight response. For example, if it is a fight syndrome, the blood flows to your hand. If it is a flee, it flows to your leg. This is exactly what we are talking about. Remember this. When you are in fear and when you are running, you will run much faster than your normal capacity. You will probably run at double the speed. When a dog is chasing you, you will be able to run at double the speed. You may climb a 6-foot wall. But in the normal situations, you may not be able to do that. That is where we are saying between our feelings and our actions, very, very strongly interconnected. We have talked about anger, we have talked about fear. Now we are going to talk about happiness, because happiness is also a feeling, right? When you keep yourself happy, what happens is there is an increased activity which is happening in your brain. Dopamines are secreted. There are so many other chemicals. We will be putting up a separate chemical video on these chemicals. You're oxidizing so many estrogens, and because when these happy chemicals are secreted, it puts off all your negative feelings. Some people inject it from outside, but that's not good. The best way to is to think, control our feelings, and ensure that those are secreted from within, which is a natural process. That's what we're going to talk about. That is where attitude, your emotional intelligence, all come into picture. Now another feeling, surprise, feeling of surprise. For example, this guy was selling Pani Puri on the road, and today he's running a multi-crore empire. When you give this news, the guy eyebrows goes up, your eyes become slightly start bigger. You are eager to know more. So what physically happens? Because you're opening your eyes just to ensure more light enters your eye. Because that is a feeling of eagerness, right? We are typically talking about those feelings. We have talked about fear, we have talked about happiness, we have talked about flight, and we have talked about happiness. Now, if you look at this expression of disgust, if you're not happy with somebody, your body language will show it up. That if you not in good terms with somebody, your behavior reflects somewhere. Throughout the world, the action for disgust is the same. You have these in animals also. We're talking about feelings. By looking at the animal, dog lovers will be able to say whether the dog is showing affection, showing love, showing anger. You can do that. One is a semantic language. We all know that there is a language associated with our body also. And it is universal. We are not talking about cultures. We are not talking about countries, because the borders drawn between these countries are drawn by us, guys, by our political framework, by our rulers. It's not done by God. These borders are not done by geography, by nature, by God. That is why we say the characteristics of human beings are same throughout the world. You don't have separate emojis for every country. The emoji for laughing is the same throughout the world, whether it is Japan, whether it is South America, whether it is India. So these are biological propensities. Maybe the customs might be different, your habits could be different, because some people eat cow, some people eat pigs, some people eat mutton, some people don't even eat your onions and garlic, because all that is governed by local customs. But here we are talking about biological characteristics, right? You have vagaries of flood, because everywhere the water supply is not same in the world, right? Some places people die because of floods. Some people in some other regions, they die because they don't have water. Drought, you have drought, famine in certain places, because these are things which mark a difference between survival and death, right? As a result of which small customs they develop. For example, if you are living on the seashore, on the banks of the river, you normally take bath 4 times in a day, because that's what the religious scriptures take bath 4 times. But you cannot apply the same in a desert, right? So these are cultures, these are subcultures, depending on the geography, etc. But broadly, when you talk about human characteristics at a neurological level, at a biological level, it is almost the same across all the countries, right? That's what we are talking about. Like, we get into this evolutionary process. As the evolution processed, our brains started evolving, our emotions started being different depending on the kind of situations we faced. Now, as far as Daniel Goleman is concerned, he talks about two different minds. Every human being has two different minds. One is a rational mind and one is a emotional mind. For example, if somebody wants to involve in an action, there is some kind of an argument, some kind of a debate which is happening inside his mind. Because one mind will tell you, your conscience will tell you, don't do that. But your mind will say, oh, no problem. It will start giving some justification. So there is a debate happening within you. There are two different things. They are talking amongst each other, debating with each other. This is what is called as dichotomy, and this is what leads to dilemma. And Daniel Goleman has talked a lot about it. On this particular thing, Daniel Goleman talks about a diversity, right? This diversity was giving some kind of an interview, and she was narrating the story. And in that particular interview, she talks ill of her husband, and she says she is least bothered about her husband, and she talks about all the harassment she faced in his hand, and suddenly she starts crying. Suddenly, which means this clearly indicates that somewhere in her mind she has a love for him even now. But what she talks is she doesn't care for him. But what she feels inside, she really loves him. That clearly came out in that interview, and Daniel Goleman talks about it. There is a very, very important word which he has said, and I would like to say that. Very important. Feelings are essential to thoughts, and thoughts are essential to feelings also. But when the passions surge, the balance tips, and generally emotions win. Beautiful sentence. The meaning is, whenever we have some feelings, they are essential for thoughts. Because it is your feelings which will create thoughts. But at the same time, thoughts also create feelings. They both are interrelated. But when passions surge, we have talked about that. When passions surge, whenever your emotions become stronger than your reason, whenever your feelings overtake your intellect, when passions surge, then this balance tips. The equilibrium is not maintained anymore, because feelings are required for thoughts and thoughts are required for feelings. But when passions surge, then this balance tips. That equilibrium cannot be maintained. It leads to kind of an inequilibrium stance. Your emotions become a lot stronger, right? Because of all this, and your rational mind stops working, right? Now, they normally take the example of the planet Jupiter because Jupiter is associated with emotions. That's what we are talking about. Daniel Goleman has mentioned about the Jupiter planet, which is why I wanted to mention that. Now, we are talking about brain. We are talking about brain for the last 15-20 minutes. We are talking about it. What is brain? We will talk a little bit about what our brain is. It's a very, very important topic, right? Now, we have talked a lot about brain. But what is brain? And I just wanted to give you some information. Now, how brain has evolved in the last so many years. Now, if you look at your brain, it is just weighing 3 pounds of cells and natural juices. Now, if you look at our evolutionary cousins, that is monkeys, it's 3 times because the monkey's brain is just 1 pound weight. Through these millions and millions of years, this brain grew bottoms up, from down to up, it has grown. Now, if you look at it, the higher centers over the period of time during this evolutionary course, which is millions of years, and it became more and more intelligent. Now, if you look at the primitive part of the brain, it is one kind of a brain stem, right? Where is it? It's on top of the spinal cord. Where is spinal cord? It is right here. This is the spinal cord, right? Here at this place. It comes from there. The brain stem we are talking about. Now, this root brain, there is a small part, and we will not go too much into biology because I'm also not a biological expert. We will just touch upon that. That performs all the life functions. For example, when you talk about life functions, it is metabolism, we eat, gets digested, we work, and your fat is burnt and all that. The root brain regulates all those functions. But the one issue is it cannot think. It may not be able to learn anything. It can breathe. We are eating. Then there is metabolism. We are jumping. We're involving in actions. It cannot think, but it can do all these functions, right? This is the root brain we are talking about. Now, once upon a time, during primeval times, only this was there. But over a period of time in this evolutionary course, this brain started evolving. That was when it started thinking. Over a period of time, a neocortex got formed, which make us think. We always say human beings have the sixth sense, animals do not have the sixth sense. What is it? We are talking about the neocortex in the brain. So in the initial stages, it was olfactory nerve, because that is something about smells. Even animals can smell, whether it is a dog, whether a tiger, whether it's cat. Cats, of course, they smell a lot. Your pigs, they all have this smelling ability. We're talking about this olfactory nerves. But over a period of time, they also started growing the centers of emotions. Animals are also governed by your fear, etc., emotions. Whether it is your horse, whether your cat, your dogs, your elephants, they can understand your emotions and they can reflect back. They can react back. And over a period of time, the emotional brain started developing. This is what we call as a limbic brain. And over a period of time, then we have this memory, then learnings, then generation to generation, things were passed on. And over a period of time, a neural circuitry got developed. And within the neural circuitry, lots and lots of circuitry, lot of connections started developing. So initially it is reptilian brain, which is a spot in the line. It can only do life functions, metabolism, actions, what we talked about. And then over a period of time, then there was a bulbous which got formed, some cells, some fluid. Then it started thinking. Along with life forms, they have this emotions. We have talked a lot about Chetak horse, Rajasthan. We have talked a lot of stories about the dogs. Its master died and the dog went to the cemetery and it didn't come back. Even birds, they have those feelings, emotions. They can understand your language, and most kings, they communicated through pigeons and little bit of intelligence started developing over a period of time, and your over a period of time that developed into a neocortex. Now, if you look at the neocortex in a fully formed form, it is only the human beings. That it is where your emotions, your cunningness, your rational mind, your emotional, what we are typically talking about this, it all started from this. This is as far as the brain is concerned, but we will not deep dive into it because this is not a biology class or something, but we want to understand what is emotions through little bit of knowledge about what brain is and how it developed. So initially it started with your reptilian brain, and then the mammalian brain, and then the human brain. Talked about neocortex. Very fast evolutionary process, right? Once you got this neocortex developed in human beings, we are talking about it. We are talking about human intelligence, and today it's so much advanced. Human beings are so advanced that they've started making machines, making robots, and human being is making the robot to think. We are talking a lot about artificial intelligence, your machine learning, all that we have started talking about. This is how the brain has grown over the period of time. Okay, now we have already compared this. Let's see what we have seen. We have talked about what is emotional intelligence. We have talked about 5 important things. First, we talked about emotional brain, then impulses to action, then we talked about rational mind, your emotional mind, and then we also talked about how the rational mind grew. The next video we will be talking about hijacking of the emotional brain. Like a hijack happens, your brain sometimes is hijacked, your rational mind is hijacked. And who hijacks it? Nobody from outside comes to hijack you. Your own minds within, your own emotions within will hijack your rational mind for some time. Your emotional mind will hijack your rational mind for some time. Your rational mind is unable to think. And by the time it thinks, your emotional mind has played havoc with your behavior. Whether it is that scene we saw in that airport, Egyptian Airlines in the first video, same place. Your rational mind was hijacked by your emotional mind for a short time. Maybe 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. In that 3 minutes, so many things have been done which cannot be undone. It is not your MS Word software that you can write something and you can undo it. You cannot undo. You cannot undo what has happened with that aircraft. Somebody murders a person, takes the head to the police station, surrenders in the police station. He's sentenced, he goes to the prison. For the next 30 years, the guy feels feeling of remorse. Oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. For 30 years, he has that remorse for what he committed in a spur of the moment for 30 seconds. In 30 seconds, he did that. That is what is hijacking. It is the story of how your emotional mind hijacks your rational mind for a temporary period of time, which leads to remorse for decades, 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades. We're going to talk a lot about that. And not just that. What is it that we can do at our level to control those impulses? How we can be more emotionally stable is what we're going to talk about in the subsequent videos. IQ is okay. Your university, we have got our degrees. More important is emotional quotient. That is what we're talking. Okay, guys. Hope you liked this video. And this is Dr. Sadashivam signing off till we meet again. Bye bye. Jai Hind.